Chapter 8 of Seven Wives and Seven Prisons, or Experiences in the Life of a Matrimonial Maniac. A True Story. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Seven Wives and Seven Prisons, or Experiences in the Life of a Matrimonial Maniac. A True Story by L.A. Abbott. Chapter 8 On the Keen Scent. Good Resolutions. Enjoying Freedom. Going After a Crazy Man. The Old Tempter in a New Form. Mary Gordon. My New Cousin. Engaged Again. Visit to the Old Folks at Home. Another Marriage. Starting for Ohio. Change of Plans. Domestic Quarrels. Unpleasant Stories about Mary. Bound over to keep the peace. Another Arrest for Bigamy. A Sudden Flight. Secreted 3 weeks in a farmhouse. Recaptured at Concord. Escaped once more. Traveling on the Underground Railroad. In Canada. It would seem as if by this time I had had enough of miscellaneous marrying and the imprisonment that almost invariably followed. I had told Governor Price when I first implored him for pardon that if he would release me I would begin a new life and endeavor to be in all respects a better man. I honestly meant to make every effort to be so, and on my stay to New York I made numberless vows for my own future good behavior. I bound myself over, as it were, to keep the pace, my own peace and quiet especially, and became my own surety. That I could not have had a poorer bondsman at subsequent events proved to my sorrow. But I started fairly, and meant to let liquor alone, to attend strictly to my medical business, which I always managed to make profitable, and above all to have nothing to do with women in the love-making or matrimonial way. With those good resolutions I arrived in New York and went to my old hotel in Cortlandt Street, where I was well known and was well received. My trunk, which I had left there 16 months before, was safe, and I had a good suit of clothes on my back, the clothes I took off when I went to prison in Trenton, and which were returned to me when I came away. I went to a friend who loaned me some money, and I remained 2 or 3 days in town to try my new-found freedom, going about the city, visiting places of amusement, enjoying myself very much, and keeping, so far, the good resolutions I had formed. From New York I went to Troy, and at the hotel where I stopped I became acquainted with a woman who told me that her husband was in the insane asylum at Brattleboro, Vermont. She was going to see him, and if he was fit to be removed, she proposed to take him home with her. I told her of the success I had had in taking care of 2 men at Newbury and Montgomery, and how I had traveled about the country with them, and with the most beneficial results to my patients. She was much interested, inquired into the particulars, and finally thought the plan would be a favorable one for her husband. She asked me to go with her to see him, and said that if he was in condition to travel, he should go about with me if he would. At any rate, if he came out of the asylum, she would put him under my care. We went together to Brattleboro, and the very day we arrived her husband was taken in an apoplectic fit from which he did not recover. She carried home his corpse, and I lost my expected patient. But I must have something to do for my daily support, and so I went to work and very soon sold some medicines and recipes and secured a few patients. I also visited the adjoining villages, and in a few weeks I had a very good practice. I might have lived here quietly and made money. Nobody knew anything of my former history, my marriages, or my misfortunes, and I was doing well, with a daily increasing business. And so I went on for nearly 3 months, gathering new acquaintances, and extending my practice every day. Then came the old tempter in a new form, and my matrimonial monomania, which I hoped was cured forever, broke out afresh. One day, at the public house where I lived, I saw a fine girl from New Hampshire with whom I became acquainted so easily, so far she was concerned, that I ought to have been warned to have nothing to do with her. But, as usual in such cases, my common sense left me, and I was infatuated enough to fancy that I was in love. Mary Gordon was the daughter of a farmer living near Keene, New Hampshire, and was a handsome girl about 20 years of age. She was going, she told me, to visit some friends in Bennington, and would be there about a month, during which time, if I was in that vicinity, she hoped I would come and see her. We parted very lovingly, and when she had been in Bennington a few days, she wrote to me, setting a time for me to visit her, but in business in Brattleboro was too good to leave, and I so wrote to her. Whereupon, in another week, she came back to Brattleboro and proposed to finish the remainder of her visit there, thus blinding her friends at home, who would think she was all the while at Bennington. Our brief acquaintance when she was at the house before attracted no particular attention, and when she came now I told the landlord that she was my cousin, and he gave her a room and I paid her bills. The cousin business was a full cover to our intimacy. She sat next to me at the table, rode about with me to see my patients, and when I went to places near by to sell medicines, and we were almost constantly together. Of course we were engaged to be married, and that very soon. In a fortnight after her arrival I went home with her to her father's farm near Keene, and she told her mother that we were engaged. The old folks thought they would like to know me a little better, but she said we were old friends, she knew me thoroughly and meant to marry me. There was no further objection on the part of her parents, and in the few days following she and her mother were busily engaged in preparing her clothes and outfit. I then announced my intention of returning to Brattleboro to settle up my business in that place, and she declared she would go with me. I was sure to be lonesome, she might help me about my bills, and so on. Strange as it may seem, her parents made no objection to her going, though I was to be absent a fortnight, and was not to be married till I came back. So we went together, and I had my cousin put up at the hotel we had lately left. After 2 weeks I was busy in making my final visits to my patients, acquaintances, she generally going with me every day. At the end of that time we went back to Keene, and in 3 weeks we were married in her father's house, the old folks making a great wedding for us, which was attended by all the neighbors and friends of the family. We stayed at home 2 weeks, and meanwhile arranged our plans for the future. We proposed to go out to Ohio, where she had some relatives, and settled down. She had $700 in bank in Keene, which she drew, and we started on our journey. We went to Troy, where we stayed a few days, and during that time we both concluded that we would not go west, but return to Keene and live in the town instead of on the farm, so that I could open an office and practice there. So we went back to her home again, but before I completed my plans for settling down in Keene, Mary and I had several quarrels which were worse than mere ordinary matrimonial squabbles. 2 or 3 young men in Keene with whom I had become acquainted twitted me with marrying Mary, and told me enough about her to convince me that her former life had not been altogether what it should have been. I had been too blinded by her beauty when I first saw her in Brattleboro to notice how extremely easily she was won. Her parents, too, were wonderfully willing, if not eager, to marry her to me. All these things came to me now, and we had some very lively conversations on the subject, in which the old folks joined, siding with their daughter, of course. By and by the girl went to Keene and made a complaint that she was afraid of her life, and I was brought before a magistrate and put under bonds of $400 to keep the peace. I gave a man $50 to go bail for me, and then instead of going out to the farm with Mary, I went to the hotel in Keene. The well-known character of the girl, my marriage to her, the brief honeymoon, the quarrels and the cause of the same, were all too tempting material not to be served up in a paragraph, and, as I expected and feared, out came the whole story in the Keene paper. This was copied in other journals, and presently came letters to the family and to other persons in the place, giving some account of my former adventures and marriage.